I only went to get my mother's photo back, but they called security on me. And that's when the vault opened. You ever feel like your entire life is just misplaced? Like it belongs in someone else's hands, in someone else's memories, boxed up in a dusty room you've never seen. But somehow, you know your soul is trapped in it? That's how I felt walking into the St. Alden estate. To them, I was a stranger. A man with worn shoes, calloused hands, and a name they barely remembered. But this place, this godforsaken mansion, it was where my mother once stood barefoot in the garden, humming lullabies to herself, long before they wiped her from their lineage. They thought she was an embarrassment. I thought she was everything. I grew up in the quiet corners of a small coastal town, far away from marble floors and crystal chandeliers. We didn't have much: one leaky roof, 3 second-hand coats, and a box under the bed where my mother kept the only photos from her past. She never talked about her family. All I knew was that her last name used to be St. Alden, until they made her change it. And in that box, buried under a yellowed wedding invite and a silver pendant shaped like a hawk, was the photo. Her photo. She was 21, standing in front of the estate gates with her hand on a man's arm, not my father. That man had his face scratched out in ink. Behind them stood a mansion I had only seen in her silent stares when she looked too long out the window. I never asked questions. But I should have. She died on a rainy Thursday. I still remember the smell of wet earth and rust as the ambulance lights flickered through the window. The box under the bed was gone when I came back from the hospital. Her friend, accidentally, donated some things to charity. All I could salvage was the silver hawk pendant. I wore it like armor after that. 15 years passed. I built a life. Failed at it. Then rebuilt it again. But I never stopped thinking about that photo. About what it meant. About what it could reveal. So when I saw the estate name in a real estate legal filing, St. Alden Holdings, Estate Repossession Registry, something inside me snapped. Not in anger. In clarity. I had to go. Not to make a scene. Not to seek revenge. I just wanted her photo back. When I arrived, no one recognized me, and that's what hurt the most. The guards at the gate looked me up and down like I was a beggar. I told them my mother's name, Elaine St. Alden. One whispered to the other like I'd spoken a curse. The other scoffed and said, "You mean the one who ran off with the janitor's son?" "Yeah, we don't talk about her." I clenched the hawk pendant in my fist. They let me through because I lied. Said I was a researcher doing a family archive project. That surname still had power. Inside, the mansion felt more like a museum. Glass displays, locked doors, golden framed oil paintings with dead eyes watching from every wall. I walked the halls like a ghost. No one stopped me. Until I found the room. It was tucked behind a tall oak door labeled Private Collection. No cameras. No guards. No noise. Just quiet and dust. The shelves were lined with artifacts from the family's travels. Diplomas, black and white portraits, ceremonial swords. And in one drawer, beneath a pile of antique correspondence, I saw it. The photo. Same eyes. Same hair. Same pendant around her neck, the silver hawk. I took it gently, like lifting a relic from a grave. But before I could slip it into my coat, I heard footsteps. "He shouldn't be here," a woman's voice snapped from the doorway. "Call security." Now, I turned. 3 of them stood there, dressed in black, sharp suits, sharper eyes. One of them I recognized. Jonathan St. Alden. My mother's cousin. The same boy who once pushed her into a pond during a family picnic. She told me about it once, tears in her voice, but pride in her spine. He stared at me like I was rotting meat. You have her face," he said coldly. I nodded. She was my mother. His face twisted like I'd spat on the carpet. "Get out, before I have you arrested for trespassing. I came for one thing. One photo. That's it. You don't belong here." I raised the photo. Neither did she, right? He nodded to the others. They reached for their earpieces. That's when I heard the clank. Behind the old cabinet, a noise. A click. Then a metallic hiss. The floor trembled, just slightly, and the back wall of the room shifted open, revealing a narrow passage behind it. Dust spilled from the edges. The light flickered deep inside. Everyone froze. One of the men whispered, "What the hell is that?" I didn't wait. Clutching the photo in one hand and the pendant in the other, I stepped past them and into the vault. They shouted. One tried to grab my arm, but it was like the wall had swallowed me. Behind me, I heard the vault door slide shut again. I was alone, with secrets no one wanted me to find. It was cold inside the vault. Not the kind of cold that bites your skin, the kind that coils in your chest, settles behind your heart, and whispers that something's been buried here for far too long. The walls were concrete, not marble. Damp, raw, and lined with metal filing cabinets, old chests, and thick leather-bound ledgers that looked centuries old. No one had been here in decades. A single flickering bulb swung from the ceiling. The air was stale, like rotted parchment and mold. But I didn't flinch. For the first time since I stepped through those gates, I wasn't afraid. Because I could feel her here. My mother. I moved slowly, careful not to trigger anything, alarms, traps, or worse, memories I wasn't ready for. On the far side of the room was an old oak desk. Dust coated the top, but there was a small indentation in the shape of a bird, a hawk. Just like her pendant. I reached down and pressed the pendant against it. Click. The drawer beneath popped open. Inside were three things. A handwritten letter with her name at the bottom. A sealed envelope with no markings. A black velvet box. My hands trembled as I picked up the letter. It was in her handwriting, looping, careful, with ink blots in the corners. If you're reading this, then the walls have cracked. I begged them to leave my things alone. I begged them to let you grow without this burden. But they erased me anyway. My name was never the problem. It was the truth they feared. You must know what they did to your grandfather. And why they tried to silence us both. Go to the cathedral archives. Look under John Alden, 1967. You'll understand everything then. I'm sorry. I love you always. Mom. I stared at the page for a long time. John Alden. I had never heard the name before. My grandfather? But why would the family hide his existence? I opened the envelope next. Inside were a series of newspaper clippings, most of them yellowed and brittle with age. One headline stopped my breath cold. Billionaire heir declared dead in fire. St. Alden family mourns mysterious loss. The photo was blurry, but unmistakable. The man in it wore a hawk pendant. The same one my mother passed to me. My blood ran cold. I opened the black velvet box last. Inside was a military-style dog tag. It read, LT, John Alden, Unit, Vault 9, Status, AWOL, below it, in tiny etched letters. Code Phoenix, burn the house to save the family. I didn't understand it all yet, but I knew what this place was now. This wasn't a vault of riches. This was a vault of sins. They hadn't just erased my mother. They faked her father's death. A cover-up. A fire. A story to bury the truth. And now I had the proof. Suddenly, I heard pounding on the wall behind me. They were trying to get in. I moved fast, slipping the letter, the clippings, and the box into my coat. There was no time to search further. I had to get out. In the corner of the vault was a narrow stairwell. Iron and rust. I took it down. Each step echoed like a scream. At the bottom was an old door marked with a faded emergency symbol. I slammed my shoulder into it. It burst open, revealing an abandoned garden shed on the estate's far edge. I stumbled into daylight, breath ragged, heart racing. And that's when I saw him. Jonathan. Waiting by the fence with two guards and a cigar in his hand. You should have stayed away, he said coldly. That vault wasn't for you. I pulled the photo from my pocket and held it up. No, I said. It was always mine. His eyes narrowed. You have no idea what you've done. Oh, I do, I said, stepping closer. I know what the family did to John Alden. I know what you did to my mother. And now I know who you all really are. You think some old documents are going to change anything? I smiled, not because I was calm, but because I wasn't alone anymore. I don't need to change anything, I whispered. I just need the world to see it. They say some bloodlines are cursed, but that's not true. It's not the blood that's cursed. It's the secrets. The cathedral archives were old, older than the estate, built with stone so thick it held the weight of centuries. I arrived just before sunset, clutching my mother's letter and the black velvet box in my coat pocket. My heart was still pounding from what I had uncovered, but the real truth was still waiting. The archives were under the west wing of St. Jude's Cathedral, hidden beneath the pulpit stairs. The priest barely looked up when I asked for the 1967 ledger. He simply said, "You're here for him, aren't you?" I froze. Him who? John Alden. His eyes were tired, his voice even more so. He handed me a thick black register, bound in cracked leather. I kept this hidden, he said, for decades. Because he asked me to. Why? Because he saved us all. And they buried him for it. Inside the ledger were handwritten pages. The ink faded in places, the names encoded with initials and nicknames. But in the back was a sealed envelope, waxed shut with a red crest. The Hawk. I opened it. Inside were military documents. Stamped confidential. It was real, Operation Phoenix. A secret intelligence initiative. Created by the Alden patriarch, John Alden, my grandfather. A mission designed during the Cold War to launder family funds into weapons research, all under the guise of humanitarian aid. Except he turned on them. He leaked everything. To a senator. To the press. Even tried to bring evidence to the church. That's when they decided he had to die. They staged the fire. Declared him dead. And my mother? She escaped before they could erase her too. No wonder she was so afraid to tell me. No wonder she buried the past beneath lullabies and silence. I turned the last page. A photo was tucked into the crease. It was him, John, in full military uniform. Young. Stern-eyed. But smiling. Beside him stood a woman. My mother. And in her arms, a newborn. Me. That's when I knew. They didn't just erase a man. They erased a movement. A betrayal. A legacy of resistance. And I wasn't just a forgotten heir. I was the only one left with the truth. I left the cathedral and drove 6 hours back home. Every mile, I replayed Jonathan's face. His arrogance. His fear when the vault door opened. He knew what was inside. And he'd hoped it would never see the light of day. But now it would. Because I was done being quiet. I wasn't a beggar at their gates anymore. I was fire. First, I made digital scans of every document. Then I mailed 3 sealed copies to a major news outlet, a military historian, a lawyer who handled whistleblower protections. Finally, I prepared the one thing they feared the most, a public message, a video. I sat in my tiny apartment, camera pointed straight at my face. The hawk pendant around my neck. The photo of John and my mother behind me. I hit record. My name is Elias Alden. You don't know me, but you know my blood. I was erased from my family's history because my mother refused to be silent. Because her father, John Alden, refused to fund war under the mask of charity. They burned him alive. Or so they thought. He lived. And I'm living proof of what they buried. Attached to this message are files, dates, signatures, and proof that the St. Alden family laundered money through Operation Phoenix, resulting in arms shipments that led to civilian deaths overseas. They called him a traitor. But he was a hero. And now the world will know. You can't kill a legacy that burns with truth. I am his grandson, and I will not be silenced. I uploaded it. Then I waited. The fire started with a spark, not flames, but truth. The video went viral in less than 48 hours. At first, people thought it was fiction, another conspiracy theory from the internet. But then the documents were verified. The dates matched. The signatures were real. And so was Operation Phoenix. And when the media found a matching death certificate for John Alden, signed by a family doctor who was later disbarred, the walls began to crack. The St. Aldens tried to spin the story, of course. A disturbed distant relative, a disgruntled son of an estranged woman. But it didn't matter anymore. The story was out. The files were real. And the world wanted answers. By the end of the week, the headlines read, St. Alden family accused of decades-long military cover-up. Whistleblower's grandson sparks international investigation. Hidden vault discovered on ancestral estate. FBI confirms raid. That last one made me laugh. They'd called security on me for taking a photo. Now federal agents were walking through their gates with warrants and crowbars. I watched it all from my apartment. No lawyers had come for me. Not yet. Because what could they charge me with? Breaking into a family I was born into? The silver hawk pendant felt heavier around my neck, like it had done its job. But there was still one thing left unfinished. I hadn't faced him. Jonathan. He hadn't gone to the press. He hadn't spoken to the media. Not once. He was hiding. But I knew where he'd be. Because power doesn't run. It fortifies. The St. Alden estate was surrounded when I returned, not by guards this time, but by journalists, drones, and distant protesters with signs that said things like, "We remember the fire. No peace for blood money. Phoenix rises from truth." I walked through them like I belonged there, because I did. And the gates opened without resistance. No one stopped me this time. No one could. He was in the study. Same room. Same desk. Except now, the curtains were drawn, the shelves were half empty, and his hands were shaking. He looked older. Thinner. As if the truth had begun eating him from the inside out. "You came to gloat?" he asked, not looking up. "No," I said. "I came to finish it." He laughed bitterly. "You think you've won something? All you've done is destroy a name that lasted 2 centuries. I stepped forward. A name built on lies, war, and cowardice. He slammed his fist on the desk. "We protected this country." "No. You profited from it. And when someone tried to stop you, someone from your own blood, you burned him alive. And then threw my mother into exile for carrying his truth. She was weak. She was stronger than all of you. She left. She survived. She raised me with nothing. And she never spoke a word of hate for you. Not once." I pulled the pendant from under my shirt and dropped it on the desk. He stared at it like it was a curse. "You wanted to forget us," I said. "Erase us. But now the world remembers." He leaned back, defeated. "It's all gone," he whispered. "Everything." I looked around. Oil paintings now shrouded under tarps. Gold-framed mirrors cracked. Generational wealth turned into haunted history. "Not everything," I said. "You still have your guilt." He didn't answer. And I didn't wait. As I walked out of the estate for the last time, I saw children playing near the gates. One of them held a homemade sign with a drawing of a hawk in flight. Their parents stood behind them, holding hands. Survivors. Veterans. Journalists. Historians. The forgotten. The erased. All of them, remembering. I didn't cry that night. I stood in my apartment, opened the drawer, and placed my mother's photo, finally safe, in a frame on my wall. Her eyes stared back at me. Peaceful. Brave. Next to it, I placed the photo of John Alden. Together again. And beneath them, the hawk pendant, tarnished but unbroken. Just like us. 5 years passed. You'd think time would dull the edge, soften the burn of betrayal, or at least let me move on. But that's not what truth does. Truth doesn't let you walk away. It waits. And it whispers. The world didn't forget what the St. Aldens did. Their name became a cautionary tale in law schools and war history classes. Their properties were seized, auctioned off. Their charitable foundation was dissolved under government orders. All assets liquidated. Every transaction traced. But it wasn't the fall that stayed with people. It was the story. One man tried to stop them. One woman ran to protect her child. And that child came back. I didn't speak to the press anymore. My face was everywhere for a while. Interviews, podcasts, documentaries. People wanted my story, my emotion, my pain packaged in neat little sound bites. But I gave them one thing. Silence. Because after a while, the story stops belonging to you. And you let it. So I returned to the only thing I still trusted. Memory. And truth. A museum was built just outside the cathedral. It bore a simple name. The Vault of Phoenix. Inside, you could see the original clippings. The pendant. Scans of my grandfather's handwritten plans. And most of all, a digital replica of the vault I discovered that day. People lined up to walk through it. To feel what I felt. To understand what it means to be buried and still rise. But I never went in. I didn't need to. I'd lived it. Then, one morning in November, I got a letter. No return address. No handwriting. Just a typed line. You missed one thing. Meet me where the fire was born. No signature. No clue. But something about the weight of the envelope told me. This wasn't a trick. This wasn't over. The estate had long since been condemned. Overgrown vines swallowed the gates. The windows were boarded. The roof collapsed 2 winters ago. But the frame still stood. And so did the memory. I stepped through the ruins alone, my boots crunching against old glass and fallen plaster. Then I heard it. A cough. Weak. Familiar. In the back corner, beneath the skeletal remains of what used to be the private study, sat a figure in a chair, thin, frail, but alive. Jonathan. I froze. He looked like a ghost. No suit. No pride. Just an old man with shaking hands and bloodshot eyes. You came, he whispered. You're supposed to be dead, I said. He laughed, dry, bitter. Aren't we all? What do you want? To give you something. He pulled a box from under his coat. Wrapped in cloth. Sealed with wax. The hawk. I didn't move. He opened it himself. Inside was a recording. An old cassette. Labeled with my mother's name. Elaine. He looked up at me. Eyes trembling. She knew everything, he said. Even things I didn't. What are you talking about? I wasn't the one who started the fire. My breath caught. What? It wasn't the family. It wasn't me. It wasn't the council. It was her. He pressed play. Her voice filled the air. If this recording ever reaches you, it means the past came back. Elias, my love, I started the fire. I didn't mean to kill him. I thought he'd be gone already. But he stayed. To protect the evidence. Your grandfather had gone underground. But there was one man left guarding the vault. A family enforcer. Jonathan's brother, Paul. I set the fire so they wouldn't erase the files. I thought they'd flee. I didn't know Paul was still inside. I staggered back. Everything inside me turned cold. My mother, the woman who sang me lullabies, who stared out the window in silence, who never once told me to seek revenge, had started it all. She came to me the day after, Jonathan said quietly, begging me to cover for her. Said she'd protect the boy. You. And you agreed? I said, trembling. You covered murder? He nodded. To protect the family. And because I loved her, I stood there for a long time. The truth burned in my chest like acid. She didn't just escape. She lit the match. And everything that followed, the cover-ups, the lies, the fire, the betrayal, it wasn't just the family's sin. It was hers, too. He handed me the tape. "I'm sorry," he said. "For everything?" He nodded. "Yes. But mostly, for thinking you were weak." I turned and walked away. The museum welcomed me quietly that night. I handed them the tape and asked for it to be archived. Not celebrated. Not shown to the public. Just kept. As truth. As memory. Because revenge ends. But history stays. I still wear the pendant. Not because of what it symbolizes, but because of what it survived. And every year, I go back to the cathedral. Not to remember the fire, but to remember what rose after it. Me.